Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a new session. So, we're almost at the fag end of this week, but we are still left with 2 more sessions to go. As you all know, in this week, we are doing our series on UP PSC exam. And today is our third session in this series. I believe this session has helped at least some of the aspirants out there of this exam. And in this session, I hope some more revision, some more questions will boost your confidence and again, help you to assess your preparation. With that being said, let's get started with our session tonight. So let me start by sharing my screen. Yes. I hope my screen is now visible to you all. Yes. So welcome again to our UPPSC exam practice session number 3. Are you all ready for the questions tonight? Yes. Please do like the session and let's get started. Let's move on to the first question for tonight. Here we go. Oh, it's quite a big question. In Margaret Atwood's Booker Prize winning novel, The Blind Assassin, the narrative, it relies on an intricate, layered structure. Which of the statements here correctly describes the technique and the metafictional framing within the text? So this question here is asking you about the narrative technique which Atwood employs in this Booker Prize winning novel, The Blind Assassin. And we know that much of the complexity of this novel stems from its narrative technique itself. All right, so when you study works like this, with complex narrative structures like The Blind Assassin, Wuthering Heights, it's imperative that you pay a very careful attention, that you pay real attention to these details of texts. Now, please take a look at the options and tell me which would be the correct answer here in this context for this question. The novel is written as a strict stream of consciousness narrative. See, the very first few words will give away you the answer. Strict stream of consciousness. Strict, it's an extreme term. Wrong. Next, the primary technique is a frame narrative that combines memoir, newspaper clippings, and a story within a story, which is ultimately revealed to be written by Iris Chase Griffin rather than Laura. That's correct. That is correct. Okay. So in The Blind Assassin, Atwood utilizes a frame narrative that combines a contemporary memoir, embedded science fiction tales, and historical documents like newspaper clippings. And this metafictional structure features a story within a story and creates a mirroring effect that reveals the narrator's hidden role as the true author. Okay, so we see how much of the complexity of this novel stems from this narrative technique itself. This layering, mirroring, story within story, right? Okay. Next. Consider the following statements regarding the choric song in Alfred Lord Tennyson's poem, The Lotos Eaters. So we know that in Tennyson's poem, The Lotos Eaters, the chorus plays a significant role. So which statements about the chorus here would be correct? It propels the epic narrative forward. No, very wrong. It does not move or it does not propel the narrative forward. No, it does not propel it forward. Very wrong. Next, it reflects Victorian anxieties regarding industrial alienation and the pressure of constant productivity. That's correct. Because during Victorian era, England was at the height of industrial revolution. Okay, next. The mariners, here we see that through this scoring song, we get to know that the mariners, they reject labor and duty in favor of perpetual leisure and dreamful ease. That's also correct. So here the correct statement would be this one, 2 and 3. Option C would be correct. Okay. So a question from the choric song of the Lotos Eaters. All right. Okay. Next. Consider the following statements regarding Sarojini Naidu's Songs of Radha. You have this poem in your syllabus, right? Songs of Radha. So, what are the correct statements here from this work? The poems present a departure from traditional romantic love, shifting the focus to a Jivatma Paramatma, individual soul to universal soul relationship. Sounds correct, right? This tradition of poetry. We can see this theme, this motif in this work. It's correct. The core emotion of the series is rooted in the Bhakti tradition, where Radha's pain and longing are transformed into spiritual ecstasy. Again, very true. Here, the protagonist's final realization is that the divine presence is found within the mirror of the heart rather than through external physical searches. This is also is very correct because we know that these poems of Sarojini Naidu are rooted in the Vaishnava tradition, right? A tradition that was inaugurated by Mirabai. Okay, so here all are correct. All are correct. All statements here are correct about these works of Sarojini Naidu. All right, next. In Can the Subaltern Speak? Gayatri Spivak uses the term epistemic violence, primarily to refer to which of the following processes? Tell me. Let me also check what you all are saying in the chat once. Okay. Yes. All of you are answering correctly. Yes, right. So, what does the term epistemic violence mean? Does it mean the physical displacement and economic marginalization of the post-colonial working class? First of all, epistemic or episteme means knowledge. So it cannot be physical displacement, right? Next, the destruction or devaluation of indigenous knowledge systems by colonial powers to establish hegemony. That's correct, right? Epistemic violence means violence which is committed against knowledge, right? Episteme means knowledge, the structure of knowledge, the forms of knowledge. So epistemic violence means violence committed against knowledge. Violence committed against knowledge. So in this particular essay, Can the Subaltern Speak? There's a phrase, epistemic violence is used to allude to the destruction or devaluation of indigenous or native knowledge systems by colonial powers to establish, to consolidate their empire. Right? Yes. So in her essay, Can the Subaltern Speak? Gayatri Spivak uses this phrase, epistemic violence, primarily to refer to the destruction or erasure of indigenous local knowledge systems and the imposition of Eurocentric or colonial perspectives. This process delegitimizes the subaltern epistemologies, rendering their voices inaudible within dominant discourses. So it's a method of silencing and suppressing the voices of the natives, the subalterns. Okay, right. Next. Here is your next question from Robert Browning's dramatic monologue, My Last Duchess. In Browning's My Last Duchess, the Duke's obsession with controlling both his late wife's behavior and her painted image reveals which central concern of the poem. Again, a very famous work. You all have read this poem, I know, many times. So tell me, what would be the correct answer? Say, it refers to the corrupting influence of absolute power and the objectification of human relationships, right? The corrupting influence of absolute power and the objectification of human relationships. Here, the Duke's obsession with controlling the Duchess's behavior and image reveals the central concerns of absolute power, objectification, and the abuse of authority. Very important. Here, it shows the abuse of authority within patriarchal relationships. By transforming his wife into a restricted art object, he highlights a toxic need for control, treating her as a possession rather than a person. So it shows the abuse of authority, abuse of power within an essentially patriarchal social structure. Right. Next. In the Glass Menagerie, Tennessee Williams uses the concept of a memory play and non-realistic staging techniques known as plastic theater. Which of the following statements best describes the primary function of this theatrical style? So a question from Tennessee Williams's Glass Menagerie. It provides a highly objective, wrong. It is not objective at all. So his very term is wrong here, objective. It's wrong. It allows Amanda to break the fourth wall? Not at all. Where is Amanda breaking the fourth wall in this play? In this play, Amanda is not breaking the fourth wall at all. Again, wrong. It externalizes the internal psychological and emotional landscapes of the characters, overriding strict realism. That's correct. Because the primary function of Tennessee Williams's non-realistic plastic theater and memory play style is to move beyond rigid realism, to capture a deeper psychological and poetic truth by utilizing subjective staging techniques. Tennessee Williams externalizes the internal emotions, memories, and subjective realities of the characters. Okay, got it? Right, next. In translation studies, when comparing the English translations of Toba Singh by Khalid Hassan and Francis W. Pritchett, which critical framework is frequently employed to assess ideological additions and omissions? Tell me. Again, a very, very important question. It's a question from translation studies. Are you all answering? I can't see your answers. I don't know why. I can see only 3 comments in the chat box. I hope all of you are answering though. Is it descriptive translation studies? No. It will be critical discourse analysis applied to geocultural perspectives. Okay, please make sure you learn these things well. So critical discourse analysis, particularly Van Dijk, D-I-J-K, I think. Van Dijk's framework is frequently employed to assess the ideological additions and omissions in comparisons of Khalid Hassan, and Francis W. Pritchard's translations of Toba Tek Singh. Okay, so please look up critical discourse analysis and translation studies. They might ask you these questions. Okay, clear? Okay, next. Which of the following is the most accurate description of the appropriate region of human liberty outlined by J.S. Mill in his essay on liberty? In his essay on liberty. Tell me. Good evening, Barbie Sharma. Tell me, most accurate description of the appropriate region of human liberty. Say, is it the domain of conscience, liberty of tastes and pursuits, and liberty of assembly? Nah. The domain of conscience, liberty of expressing one's thoughts, and liberty of contract. It is the domain of conscience, liberty of expressing and publishing opinions, and liberty of association. Okay? The appropriate region of human liberty is the sphere of self. It is a sphere of self regarding actions, those that affect only the individual or others only with their free and informed consent. In this domain, the individual is sovereign, and society or the state has no legitimate authority to interfere. Okay, so please look up this essay really well because they can ask you textual based questions. Especially this line, this quote from the text, that appropriate region of human liberty. What does J. Mill even mean by that? Which are those areas of liberty which J. Mill has talked about? Where the individual is the sovereign, the ultimate, and the society has no right to interfere in the matters of the individual. The individual can do whatever he or she feels or decides to do. Okay? Okay. Next, which of the following statements correctly identifies the literary context and target of the prologue of She Stoops to Conquer? Now, She Stoops to Conquer, or The Mistakes of a Knight. It's a major work of comedy by Oliver Goldsmith, and this work was published in 18th century, right? She Stoops to Conquer, or The Mistakes of a Knight. It's a very popular comedy by Oliver Goldsmith in the 18th century. So, here, what is this prologue about? The prologue of this comedy is targeting or talking about what? It praises the sentimental comedy. Absolutely wrong. Oliver Goldsmith would never praise sentimental comedy. He was almost against it, right? It criticizes the excessive moralizing of sentimental comedy and laments the death of the comic muse. You have to understand that Oliver Goldsmith was against the excesses of sentimental comedy, and hence the prologue to this play, it criticizes the excessive moralizing of sentimental comedy and laments the death of the comic muse. Clear? Okay, next. So if you want, you can still join our NTNet 1-month crash course. It's going on right now. Okay, right. Next. In the introduction to Decolonizing the Mind, Gugiwa Thiong'o discusses the cultural bomb. What does he identify as the primary effect of this cultural bomb on the colonized people? So if you have read this essay, or if you have at least gone through the summary of this work, you know what is this question about. What does Gugiwa Thiong'o mean by cultural bomb in this essay? Tell me, what is it? Cultural bomb in the essay Decolonizing the Mind by Gugiwa Thiong'o. Cultural bomb. It is the annihilation of people's belief in their names, languages, unity, and ultimately themselves. In Decolonizing the Mind, Gugiwa Thiong'o identifies the primary effect of the cultural bomb as the annihilation of people's belief in their own languages, names, heritage, environment, and ultimately themselves. It forces the colonized people to view their own culture as a wasteland and identify with the oppressor's language and culture. So it's like this is how you internalize inferiority complex. This is how the colonial masters make the colonized people internalize inferiority complex, that your language is worthless, your culture is useless, your knowledge systems are futile, your foods, your clothes, your songs, everything is inferior. It is not making sense. It is very uncultured, savage. So this is how the colonial masters make the native people internalize inferiority complex. This is what W.E.B. Du Bois talked about as double consciousness. When the natives see themselves not only through their eyes, but through the eyes of the colonial white masters. And hence, they learn to see themselves as inferior and the colonial masters as superior. And exactly this was discussed as cultural bomb in the essay Decolonizing the Mind by Gogi wa Thiongo. Okay, next. Which classical play does Hamlet request the first player to perform, noting its specific focus on the murder of King Priam by Pyrrhus? A textual question again. Tell me. It is Dido, Queen of Carthage. In Shakespeare's Hamlet, Act 2, Scene 2, Hamlet asks the first player to perform a speech describing the slaughter of King Priam and Queen Hecuba by the Greek warrior Pyrrhus, taken from the fictional or classical tale of Dido, Queen of Carthage. Okay, got it? Right. Next. What specific role did Edgar Allan Poe assign to the refrain of Nevermore regarding its metrical and psychological effect on the reader? Again, you all know this, the popularity of this poem, The Raven, and its refrain Nevermore. It is what? What is this refrain even doing here? It is here to act as a supernatural refrain that intensifies the narrator's despair. Nevermore, nevermore. In his essay, The Philosophy of Composition, Edgar Allan Poe explains that he used the single word refrain, nevermore, to anchor the poem's melancholic tone. He assigned two distinct yet connected roles to the refrain regarding its metrical, sonic, and psychological effect on the reader. So, this refrain here, nevermore, it is not just about creating a metrical pattern, it is also about continuing, maintaining that melancholic tone. Okay, because we know it's a poem which deals with what happens when grief outruns your craft. When grief outruns your craft. Okay, because here we see the speaker is lamenting the loss of his beloved Lenore, right? So that's all for tonight from our side. I hope you guys love the questions and the discussion. And if you want, you can join our 1 month NTA Net crash course. Okay, so it was lovely meeting you all again. Please keep studying, and I will see you all again tomorrow at 9:30 p.m. Okay, till then, take care.